Great, thank you. And thank you everybody for being here. My name's Dakotah Apostolou. I'm excited to be here and have an opportunity to share with you about Cohere. And while I was sitting here today thinking about what and how to share with everybody, and there's so many incredible people here building incredible projects, that I was thinking, how can I best share what we're doing in a way that has the most value? And so what I'm going to do today is share who I am, what we're building, how we're building it, and where we're headed. And then what I'd like to do is open that more for a dialogue and a conversation. One of the things that's really important to us is not to reinvent the wheel. And that's something that we were talking about earlier. What are the lessons that we can apply and not have to redo? And so with that, I'm really excited to be here today and share what we're doing, and then open the conversation hereafter to brainstorm and connect. So my background's in architecture. I trained at the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture, and as a young child, I had a speech impediment, and I was really drawn to architecture and designing and building as a young person. And because I started training early, I had good opportunities when I graduated from school. And most of my work was doing very, very high-end homes. But ultimately that left me feeling a little bit like, well, why are we working on oligarchs' homes when we actually have a planet that's like on fire? And so I shifted my practice into how can we build architecture for social impact? And that was far more fruitful. And ultimately, however, it still left me feeling like we're not actually getting at the root of the thing, which in my belief is the economics. How do we actually start to slowly change the economics to have a win-win for our environment and for our communities? And that, in a nutshell, is the genesis of Cohere. What we're doing with Cohere is we're building co-working innovation hubs for communities of change makers who want to have the ability to continue this lifestyle of traveling around the world, but with a community of like-minded people, but also to have the rewards of the fruits of their labor. So what we worked on is a system where when a member contributes to Cohere, increases the value of Cohere, they gain equity in Cohere. And we really see this as an important fundamental thing. It's nothing particularly new. I mean, we're talking basically a co-op, but with some Web3 integration, some blockchain integration, we start to be able to slowly change the game and realign some incentives that we think are very important to helping be of service to the larger regenerative movement. What we see in this space, and our point of view, is that we have the showcase role model developments, like what you guys are doing in the Valley. That's the target of where we want to go. But we want to do that in a way that we can help the communities that exist accelerate, and then how do we help fund and build new ones in a decentralized way so that we can grow and accelerate the whole. And so with this economic model, that basically when one contributes to the whole, their share value goes up. In a very simple economics, we start to have an incentive to grow the value of the commons. And so that is what we've been working on, is how do we actually build out these co-working hubs and co-living hubs for the change makers. One of the things that I think it was Joe Brewer talking yesterday on Elliot's gathering, there is things move at the speed of trust. And we really believe that. And we really believe that instead of trying to build the village grows. The village grows from aligned people building out a culture. But before you can have a culture, you need a community. And so getting a bunch of friends together and building an intentional community to us is a little bit jumping the gun. What we've seen in the space after going to countless masterminds and all of these impact events is it's really, what if we had us all here together for a month and we had a month to drop in on our work? And we believe that when we do that, when we bring together people for prolonged periods, that's what accelerates and is the most important flywheel. The 2 a.m. conversation around the kitchen counter is what, in my experience, is the things that like the sparks that change the game, where we realize we're actually in this together, we deeply care about each other, and we can now amp each other's work because we trust each other. And it's not rocket science what we're doing is actually very, very basic, and many of our sister orgs are doing the same thing, and we want to be able to help move that along in a faster clip. The other why around why we're doing this is we're in a climate crisis. We believe the Earth is rebalancing the population, and that's happening at an ever-accelerating rate. And we should not put our heads in the sand out of fear of the immensity of the situation, but come together and get more organized to actually do something about it and think on the systemic level. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here with everybody's work. I know all of us are holding that same ethos. So I'm not saying it to prove a point or anything, but that's the why for us, is that we see the gravity of the situation and we actually think that that is a reason for hope. That's a reason to leapfrog into the future and cut out a lot of the BS around trying to own market share. No, the more regenerative community hubs we can build, the better. We need as many as we can get. We need as many of our sister orgs doing the same thing and building out like-minded projects, all the better, like what Momentum's doing, or your project, Charlotte, in San Jose. Like these projects that are already up and going, how do we help knit those together even more? And so one of the things with Cohere is that it's member-owned. Again, anytime someone who's a member contributes to increasing the value of Cohere, they gain equity via a security token that is compliant with the SEC, and they actually have the ability to garner that energy. It's a bummer if you're a woofer and you come work it somewhere and you don't get the fruits of your labor. People come in an intentional community space, and you come and you work for 3 years building out a permaculture garden or a food forest, which in my opinion is one of the most important ways to increase a property value. Let's focus on our food, our water, and coherent community. That right there is like from a game A economic perspective, we believe is one of the most important ways we can increase property values. But we have all these people who are contributing into properties in a patriarchal or outdated power structure or ownership structure where one thing shifts in the power dynamic and now someone feels they need to leave. And what happens to that 5 or 6 or 10 years of sweat equity? And that starts to create, in my opinion, these kind of unhealthier codependent relationships in many intentional communities. And that's a pain point we think that this is helping to alleviate. I was working today earlier with Max, and we were going through what are some of the first principles that we're operating with Cohere. And I want to share some of those today because that's what I think is there's some major drivers that we have in our point of view. And one of those is pragmatism. How do we pragmatically move into moving this ball forward? And so I'm going to pull up my notes here. And so the why, we all understand what the challenge is. The what is we're building these hubs around the world, and we're trying to grow as many as we can. This year we're launching 4 properties. This one here, Rat Park, will be our first Cohere node location that we're setting up in this structure. And this one here, and then we'll be here for 3 months, and then we'll be in Berlin at Mols, where we're setting up at Mols, and we're doing the same thing, but in the urban context of central Berlin. And then we'll be in Guatemala at Lake Atitlan, and we'll be there for 3 months, followed by Iquitos at Blue Morpho with Hamilton Souther down in Iquitos, deep in the jungle, the Amazon. And we're continuing to onboard existing properties every 3 months. And these properties are case studies around how do we effectively put us all to work? How do we align the scopes of work for instance, we're here in this incredible property. Okay, what's the next stage? How do we build out the food forest? How do we build out the next 15 cabins? How do we build out, next thing we're going to renovate the wood shop and turn that into a beautiful co-working space. So we have very tangible things to do in these properties. And that's part of the ethos for us is, let's just do the thing. Let's build the thing. Now, of course, I'm coming from an architecture background, so I put a lot of weight into the physical environment. And, it's like you're a hammer, everything's a nail. And I definitely fall in that category in a few ways. But for us, we do believe that the infrastructure is the baseline. Let's build the pyramid from the bottom up. And we need that infrastructure for us to thrive in and make it easier for us to thrive while the world radically changes around us. Because it's not only, runaway climate change, it's collapsing of democracy. We have the rise of authoritarianism. We have the Credit Suisse just went under. I mean, we've got major systemic collapse of the old paradigm. And that, to us, is extremely exciting. And I think to most of us here, that's extremely exciting. Yeah, it's like, there's the opportunity. It's like on like the interpersonal level, it's like, how can you have courage if you don't have hardship? This is from one of my favorite books. Like, there are these things that we came here to do, in the context of the situation that we're in is the opportunity for us to rise to the occasion. And again, we're all motivated, we're all doing that here. And at Cohere, what we're trying to do is help that along by creating this decentralized network. And then really like share the making of. One of the things that's really key for us is that we don't have it figured out. We've spent a year developing out a mechanism for a legally compliant, asset-backed security token. It took us a lot of time to figure out how to fine-tune, and through that little piece of technology, that allows us now to align the incentives so that we all have that win-win. Now, because most of us are deep in the Web3 space, we can very much nerd out on what that means in the secondary markets. What that means when crypto's imploding, because much of crypto didn't have much utility, and the stock market's wonky, and we've got major bank collapses. I mean, Silicon Valley Bank, the 16th largest bank in the United States, just went under, last week? Like one of the most important banks in VC, in private equity. So you have private equity just got a whole lot less liquid. And what we see in the market, in the condition at large, in the secondaries, is that here's a security token that's actual equity of Cohere. We're actually co-owning the thing, not the rights of use to the thing, but the thing. And what happens over time, we believe, why would someone speculate on Doge or Bitcoin or these other coins that, like Bitcoin's valuable because governments can't print more of it. You can't just go print another $1 billion or $100 billion or $1 trillion of Bitcoin, right? No one can do that. So it's a more stable store of value in that sense. But with what we're doing, as we build more communities, as we finance more communities, as we knit together a bigger ecosystem, the base value of that ecosystem is going up and up. And since we're all co-owners, anyone who pitches in becomes a direct owner. And I'll circle back onto why I think that's so important on a social level. But on the technology side, on the market side, what we're doing is every year, every time we onboard a property, every time we increase our revenue, every time we grow our membership, the base value of Cohere grows. And so if you're on the secondary markets and you're looking at, okay, I need a safe place to put my money because the stock market's imploding, and I don't want to buy a radically overinflated house in the United States in terms of cost, like the cost of houses in the United States and Europe or in much of Southeast Asia are through the roof. So, and people want hard assets. Well, what if you could speculate on a token that's actually a share of a company that has a real valuation, real buildings, a real community of people who really care, and we give a shit, and we're standing up for humanity. We're doing the work. And what if we have a reason to better collaborate and connect in these hubs? That's what we're after. And we think that in and of itself can be a really incredible thing on the secondary markets. We believe that when we're ready to start to advertise that to the broader world, that's wildly important. Another bias we have is we believe that many of our sister orgs who are developing the currencies may be, it seems to us, jumping the gun. We believe that the first step in a healthy monetary system is the store of value. What is the gold? In our era, we strongly believe, at least for the people that we're serving, the gold is food, water, resilient buildings, and coherent community. Living in right relation, showing the rest of the world that, hey, actually, it makes much more value, it makes more money to live in right relations with the planet. That this isn't rocket science. That we can actually build in a way, we can actually build our buildings that restores the health of the landscape. These things are not particularly hard to do. They have been hard to get to market and get to scale. And so that's what we're after. How do we scale the system by making us all shareholders in it for the fruits of our labor? The other piece that is really important to us is access to equity. In my background in architecture, I've done quite a bit of work in the social impact space around how do we provide access to affordable housing. In the US, the SEC makes it very difficult for people to get access to equity. You can't invest if you don't make a lot of money. Now, of course, that's initially, I believe, through maybe that is for good reasons initially, but it really becomes, as the wealth further consolidates, which is what we've seen during COVID, an extreme further acceleration of consolidation of wealth. I mean, more so than ever before in human history. Do we have so much wealth in so few hands? And so many people cut out of the market, cut out of owning a home, or cut out of having equity or building a portfolio. That is now very much reserved for the people who already had the wealth to begin with. And we believe that we're at a tipping point in society. As that continues to happen, societies are breaking down. People are hitting the streets. Enough is enough. In the context of that, with runaway climate change, is a crazy time. And it seems to me that most people, you talk to someone who's a single parent, taking care of an entire household on their own, and you tell them, it's like, next year that hurricane is actually going to be worse. That's the next time that hurricane is going to be the next biggest hurricane ever in human history, and that's pretty much guaranteed. Or that next wildfire, the same thing. And so, I mean, I personally believe that we're infinite eternal beings, and that we're here, as what Jacob said the other day, we're material beings, we're spirits here, spiritual beings here to have a material experience. I thought you said that really great. Jacob, who led an amazing yoga class the other day and manages our online community, that is how I feel as well. And I think that that's a side tangent, but the important thing what I'm trying to get at is when we provide that access to equity in a way that we all win, we think that this is a very practical step to help accelerate the larger regenerative movement. And our goal is just, let's put ourselves to work in these properties that we're taking on this year, as well as financing. So the next piece of Cohere that we're very excited about, we just launched our online community space. Over the last 2 years, we've been building the back end. We spent a year on the technology legal side. We spent a year going through Techstars and going through like the heart of game A. Although Techstars I think is a fantastic organization, it's very much in that venture capital world of trying to maximize your exit. There's no reason, we're not trying to exit. We're trying to build the most important pool of real estate on the planet. And one of the things that is very important to us is how we syndicate. How do we raise cash for multiple regenerative hubs at once? There's a lot of dry powder in the jargon. There's a lot of money to be deployed right now that is getting tight. The monetary systems are getting tight right now because of the rising interest rates and the further consolidation of wealth. Nonetheless, people are looking for safe havens. And as people recognize the gravity of the situation we're in, we see that there's a huge appetite to put lots of money into these regenerative projects. And so what we're doing on our online community hub is we're vetting the projects around the world and looking to raise capital for those in tranches. At Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, we've got several very large properties that are being led by incredible people. We can raise capital for those as a tranche for 3 projects. And we can do that for properties around the world. And that's where we're headed towards. We want to eventually have a source where our community is helping us in helping itself to vet the projects. What are those best cutting edge projects that are going to make the biggest flywheel of impact in their local community? Because that's the other thing. We have to enhance our local bioregions. That's fundamentally critically important. However, in order to do that, we need to network those properties together. I kind of like the Greek city-states. You know, they were powerful because they were individuated, but they weren't separated economically. And that's something that we often use as an analogy. Individuated, but without separation. It's about the localism. It's about each hub being itself and being rooted in its place and its time. But then how do we economically knit those together so that we have a reason for us to share best practices from each and every person's community to the next? So that's really where we're at. We're building this. We've built our online community platform. We're launching right now our founding members. We're bringing together 250 change makers, coming together to help us accelerate this first stage for this online community platform we've been building out that we're now taking live. We're onboarding a pipeline of property around the world that we've been vetting, that we can show the family offices, hey, look, we've got deal flow, right? You want You recognizing your risk profile for beachfront condos in Miami is pretty high? Yeah, no shit. Why don't you invest in regenerative infrastructure? Buildings that are built to withstand the changing of the weather and the changing of the long-term and short-term climate. So that's where we're at on the funding side, is how do we move this ball forward and vet these things as a community and create that win-win and grow this thing. So that's an overview of where we're at. I would love to take some questions and make this more of a dialogue, and then see what I can help further share. Yeah, please.
Could you explain how the token value is calculated?
How the token value is calculated. How is the token value calculated? The token value is calculated on a bonding curve, where every time cash comes in, or the equivalent of cash, because we really believe that there's lots of sources of value. It's not just fiat money. It can be crypto. It can be land. It can be skills and labor. All of that we give, like for skills and labor, we have a fair market valuation, right, which is a messy thing, but that's what the best thing we have. By that I mean, if you're a graphic designer and you want to do graphics for Cohere, we'll pay you in security tokens for the equivalent value of what you would normally charge. So as we onboard more value into Cohere, if it's a property, it's the assessed value by an assessor. Now, all of these things have limitations. Like, for instance, the assessed value of a property is generally determined by the comps. So the value of your home is determined generally by the other types of homes in the area. So if you're building something that's a one-of-a-kind, never been done before, showcase regenerative community, there is no comps. So it's going to be probably very undervalued. But for us, one of the key things that we're working on is what are the systems that we have today that we can leverage and then be a bridge into game B. And so, but to further answer your question, the value of the land, the value of our revenue, and the value of our IP, eventually an affiliate marketplace. There's many things that will eventually add on to the Cohere network, because we really see Cohere being a flywheel for a marketplace. Imagine we have a group like us living together for 3 months. Like most of the Cohere members are entrepreneurs, they're running initiatives, they're running foundations or funds, they're out to change the world. Well, one of the biggest things as an entrepreneur is, who do you know? And so as we grow this family of change makers who have deep, meaningful connections because they've spent time and been living the change, that starts to create this amazing flywheel of work opportunities for everyone. And that then grows an affiliate marketplace over time. So all of these things just have valuation that are pretty cut and dry, and that determines the value of Cohere, and the security token is a share of that whole. Yeah. All right, guys. Yeah, shall we, let's continue with a few questions, and then, yeah. Would you like to repeat your question from before the rain?
Yeah, so I was asking how someone who might have a property that wants to interact with Coherent, like, if you have a process for vetting or getting to know each other and that type of thing.
Yeah, that we don't yet. We have been doing it internally as a small team, and we've been currently doing the due diligence ourselves, where we go to the property, we actually live there, we get boots on the ground, and as a core team. As we grow, we're developing systems where we can vet those properties as a community. So we're actively developing those currently. What are the things that we need to vet for? Who are the most aligned people? What do we need to provide as training for community managers or for you name it? So that's something we're actively developing right now. And our community portal is where we're highlighting those properties and sussing out that process. And one of the things that's really important to us at Cohere is that we build it as we go. And there are these systems in place that we were talking about before, like with governance. There's so many skill sets people have developed, there's so many systems that people have developed and spent 30 years developing, that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And so as we go, we're constantly looking at how we can bring in the expertise for these systems, like governance. As we grow the community and as we grow the scale of the locations, we'll need really refined governance systems. But we don't need to reinvent those. Those have already been well thought through. So in the same case, in how do we vet properties at scale? That's something that we're fine-tuning right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about your token?
Oh, can you tell us more about your token?
Yeah, so basically we've just tokenized the equity of Cohere and put that equity on chain. And so we believe that Web3 is a tool insofar as it is useful. We don't just do everything on Web3 or on blockchain just because. It's like, what is the best tool? And by having our equity tokenized in a way that's compliant, allows us to do a whole world of things. And that's why we're doing it. And we believe that decentralizing finance so that we all get the rewards of what Wall Street used to only have is extremely important. But we're not super hardcore about that. It's just like, what is the best tool? If it's a Web 2 booking tool, okay. If it's a Web 3 booking tool, even better. But where is the technology? And so that's what we've done, is tokenizing our equity so that we can all buy in or invest in and then sell that equity afterwards. So like we just had a little, when it was raining, 4 or 5 of us got together and just chatting further. So generally when you invest in a company, you can't get that equity out of the company unless it's between rounds or when there's an acquisition or a sale of the company. Now, what that leads to is then shareholders are constantly kind of incentivized to sell out to the biggest monopoly. And because valuations in private and venture capital is really how much can you get all your investors together to then agree whatever the valuation is. And if all those investors that you're culling together, all those VCs happens to be your friends from school, you can get crazy inflated valuations. This startup is worth $100 million. And that's just kind of the things that's kind of ingrained in the existing system. And and that's part of like private equity in venture is always looking for these monumental maximum extractive exits because, well, every shareholder wants to cash out by selling it to the monopoly. That's how you're going to get a crazy valuation and get your money out. So by tokenizing our equity in a way that's compliant, investors, whether they put in cash or labor, can actually sell those shares. Mm-hmm. Now, what we're doing as a company is we're taking aside 20% of our profit and setting that aside so that we have cash and reserves to buy back people's shares or the security tokens. We're also pooling our security tokens with another cluster of companies. And then there's the entire secondary market that people can sell their security tokens on after a 1-year lock. So because we're a security and we're regulated, the SEC requires a 1-year lock. And so, which is good because it alleviates any risk from pump and dumping. And so, yeah, that's a little bit more about that. Yeah, you maybe Max and then Jonathan?
Just a quick extension of that. Are
Yeah.
you capping the amount of tokens to have hard value, or is that a dynamic kind of number?
Yeah. It's more dynamic. The math on it is a little bit hard to easily articulate without visual aids. That basically, how can I best explain this? We're not like a traditional crypto token where we mint a fixed amount of token, and then as tokens get bought, there's a dwindling pool. We actually mint token when cash comes in. And we're doing that on a bonded curve where there's always a pre and post money valuation. So normally in private equity, you have, or in venture, you have rounds, right? Like you have a seed round, an A round, a B round, and you're getting all these people together to say, what is the value of that for the cash coming in? With this system, anytime cash comes in, there's a new pre-post money valuation. And tokens are issued commensurate to that fractional value. So it's not actually a fixed total. Yeah, Jonathan?
Are the tokens just a tool for investment, or do they also come with certain benefits like staying at a place or other benefits?
Right now, they're only a means for us to decentrally to make access to equity more easy and to structure buybacks and have access to the secondaries, all the things we talked about. But we're not using them as utility tokens. Now, we've separated governance from ownership completely. And the reason we did that is it seems like every time someone comes in and they put in $10 million into a project or a larger sum of cash, there becomes an unhealthy power dynamic in terms of the lifestyle. And so we've totally separated that. Our members, especially our founding members, have preferred access to our locations. But they invest, and then you have preferred access, but you're still paying at that location to rent that location. So Cohere is more like a co-op, like a health food store, where you co-own the health food store, but you're still paying for your groceries. But the more you use and buy groceries at that store, the more you increase the value of the equity in the company that you co-own. Now, in the future, what we can do is now work with a sister org, of which there are many, with incredible utility tokens. We can start to benchmark a utility token to our asset token. And there's all sorts of really exciting things we can do with that, like paper money used to be backed by gold. Right now, what our intent is let's build the gold and overlay the next things as we need them. Yes?
What does it look like on the other side? Say I have a 60-acre property with some infrastructure on it already and would love to have you guys come out and assess it. What does that process look like? And then what does it look like if it is chosen and you guys come stay?
Yeah.
What are the financial elements of that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. That's like quite literally what we're in the middle of right now with this property here. And so one of the things I'm really excited about is how we move. This is part of a larger conversation around how landowners can stake or invest a chunk of their land into Cohere for equity in Cohere. So a property owner, like let's say if we're using the legal wrappers that are common in the United States, typically people put land in an LLC, a limited liability company. You have 100 shares of it. Someone can take 10 shares of a piece of property and invest those 10 shares, basically swap it for equity in Cohere. Now, they still maintain governance rights. They still have the run of the place. We're still doing a profit share. That's still their land. But now they have a chunk of liquidity with that equity they got because they can resell it in a year. They now have liquidity off of their land, but they still maintain their land. This has profound implications in how we reduce some of the negative impact of gentrification. So you have, let's say in Costa Rica, you have lots of people have lived here for generations, and they have land, and that land price are skyrocketing in value. So local people are, incentivized to sell that asset. And here's the ring. And it's befitting because now people are losing asset to their indigenous lands or to their historic lands. And that has terrible incentives because if you have an economy, a value system going up in a location, and only some groups of people have the access to the equity and others don't, and people are selling their equity for cash, which is going down in value, very shortly that creates a crazy striation in the society. And that's we can see that in Costa Rica. Like, what did the cost of living went up? Like, how much this last year? Like a shitload, to put it like professionally, right? So landowners can actually invest their land or a chunk of that land. Better yet, they can put that land into a trust and give Cohere a license to operate on that land. And now Cohere, and this is very common in Brazil or in New Zealand. Now Cohere is an operator on that land, and we get that land off the speculative market. We keep that land in the original family's hands. So if it's a 1,000-hectare ranch, Cohere only needs a little small piece of property to operate. We have a 99-year auto-renewing lease. We build out an innovation co-living hub, and we start to bring infrastructure. We start to show, hey, this is how you can build in a regenerative way on that land, increasing the land value. So there's quite a few ways that landowners can partially stake their property or invest their entire property, and we put it into a trust. We're developing quite a few exciting models in that we think are really important to empower local communities. Mike, possible?
Thank you. All right, just noticing we have 5 minutes, and you've touched on something that I think is very exciting to a lot of people in this room. In the beginning of your presentation, you were speaking to real property, real community, real value. I love that. And then, as you brought it now and spoke to how the land can be put into trust
Yeah.
by either the current landowners or by a consortium of
Yeah.
people who have the ability to do that. My question comes, so when we use a trust, we have the ability to secure the purpose of that land, the care of that land.
Yeah.
When we allocate rights for the use of it, we can establish what responsibilities come with that. Where in the equity and the assets and the tokens is the value of the land itself and that valuation that you're looking
Yeah.
for, and the value of the community, the care and stewardship of creating community and infrastructure and healthy relationships with the neighbor? Are they balanced or counter-represented to ensure that because it's something that we can sell later because this value is going up, that isn't a driver to
Yeah.
actually sell the land, but instead it's to build the value of the community and the care of it and never sell the land again?
Yeah. Well, and the great thing in this system is that investors have the ability to sell their shares in the whole and don't need or not forced to try to liquidate the asset. And that, so Cohere has quite a bit to further evolve into. We have a rent-to-own model that we're very excited to roll out. There's an LCA DAO that we eventually want to roll out. There's so many more layers we want to roll out. Right now, we are early stage. We're building out a single mechanism that we think changes the game. But there's many, many more layers. In Ecuador, we just put down payment for a property in Ecuador. We're putting that land into a trust, but it's not a trust, it's a holding company that with bylaws written like a trust, because trusts there aren't as valuable. It's just whatever legal wrapper. We get that land off the speculative market, right? So then we have operating entities operating on that land. Those sub-LLCs, like a reforestation, we're going to reforest Polonia, which flowers in 6 months that we can produce honey with. We have these verticals of restoration, we have these verticals that cash flow through restoring the health of the land. And those increase the value of the total aggregate pool. And the profits of those pass up back into Cohere that we all co-own. And as we build out a pool of cash reserves, we have more funds then to reinvest back into more properties. But what you're touching on is the assessed value of that land. How do we actually honor the true assessed value of that land? And we don't know the best method for that. You know, what Regen Network is doing, and some of the other sister orgs, I think, are paving the way. There's quite a few orgs doing incredible work on that, in that space specifically. And we're excited to figure out how we do that best. But those are exciting pieces to integrate.
Yeah. And we do have people that are, those you mentioned, and there's some in this room. So I know that this particular topic around land ownership and valuation of the contributions that are being made to Cohere in this case, and also the contributions to the surrounding neighborhood. So as we transition into our next panel, which we're going to take a very firm 5-minute break when you're finished here, and come back into this regenerating ecosystems panel, I believe we've just touched on some really valuable things that we can continue the conversation around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. And there's quite a few very exciting people we're all doing really incredible work. And so I've been looking forward to sharing this. So then there's more background for us to jump into. Where are these next stages where we really could use support?
Yeah.
Yeah. Elliot, did you want to say one thing before we close?
Just want to understand. Thank you. Just following up on Charlotte's prompt from last night. What do you need? How can this group help?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. A few things. One, we're constantly onboarding what we need at the moment that we need it, and we're trying to not get ahead of ourselves, which a lot of startup companies or DAOs fail. Trying to get a tool set before you actually need it. Really, what we need right now is, further sophistication, how we onboard more contributors. How do we create that system? Because there's so many pieces. Cohere's such a big vision. There's so many moving parts. we need some more badass operational people to help us facilitate how we onboard more people and have the downstream capacity to keep those things really focused. Yeah.
So it's the design process for onboarding participants, not the participants you need right now.
Well, a little bit of both. Actually, all the above. You know, like we can always use more capital, we can use more skill sets, we can use more help on how do we like start planning out the next stages of development. How do we need help with operations of properties. I mean, the list is ever growing on things. And that's what's so exciting to us is that we want to always be growing the areas where people can plug in and then again, all co-own it together. So one of the things we're working on is getting all of that in our online community, getting all those jobs or bounties really clearly documented so it's easy for people to come in and figure out where to plug in. Yeah, well, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate being here.